Hey everybody, it looks like Trump is back in office for term number 2. So we're going to quickly cover what he's done so far in terms of executive actions. And we'll also see what might be coming up for the next few weeks. But this is it, the day finally happened. It's Trump 2.0, and half the country probably going to be excited, the other half probably horrified. But the main thing we're going to do is glance over the executive actions. We'll focus on the list here on Washington Post. Now, as I scroll down, a comment about executive actions in general. Now, they've been around forever, but these days it does seem like they've kind of gotten out of hand. The outgoing president puts out a ton of them, many of them symbolic. The incoming president just reverses a bunch of them. That same cycle happens over and over, and that same cycle of bypassing Congress is not really that satisfying. Now, with Trump coming back in here, I'm sure a lot of people are in a wait-and-see type of mode. They want to give him a chance. They know there's a lot of problems out there. Let's see what he does. And with this initial batch of executive actions, just like with any president, I'm sure there's going to be a few things people like, and then there's going to be a few things they have serious reservations on or are against. That's what happens in politics. If you ever get anything you like, you're also going to get some things you don't like. So it says a little bit about what Trump promised in terms of executive orders here at the top. And then it talks about how Trump has rescinded a bunch of the orders from Biden on his way out. So let's go through some of these new ones. We've got ending birthright citizenship in the United States. The U.S. government will no longer recognize the citizenship of children born in the United States to immigrants who lack legal status, according to an order Trump signed Monday. It also bars it for children born to people on temporary work, student, or tourist visas. And that's expected to face a lot of legal challenges, and it already has. Now, I would guess a broad ban on that would not be constitutional. But in terms of what the American people want, that I'm actually not sure of. I'll probably put out a community poll on it at some point, but I think there's going to be different degrees of it. I would guess there's going to be more sympathy for children that are born here, even if their parents are not legal, as long as they've been here a long time. Those might be called the dreamers, but there's other areas there might be more support for. The temporary work or tourist visas. I could see more levels of support for those types of situations, but immigration is arguably going to be Trump's biggest issue. And next, we've got declaring a national emergency on the southern border. The same thing happened during the first Trump term. I don't think there's going to be an extreme amount of pushback on that one, except of course from Democrats. But there's also halting refugee admissions for at least 4 months and designating cartels and gangs as foreign terrorist organizations. He directed the military to make it a priority to seal the borders and end unlawful mass migration, drug trafficking, and other crimes. The U.S. will stop allowing migrants who cross the border illegally into the U.S., even if they are seeking asylum, per one of Trump's directives. He also ordered the restoration of the Remain in Mexico policy, which requires migrants to await asylum hearings in Mexico. That part, I think, is going to be broadly popular with most Americans. We've got one here to pursue the death penalty for all crimes of a severity demanding its use. That, I think, has a lot of gray area in it. Next, making changes to the federal workforce. So this is about eliminating remote work for federal employees, but agency heads shall make exemptions they deem necessary. We've got a freeze on federal hiring with exceptions for military personnel and jobs related to immigration enforcement, national security, or public safety. Then a reinstatement of a policy that would strip employment protections from tens of thousands of federal workers. That one I think is going to be controversial. I know from Trump's perspective, he's looking to get rid of the deep state and get more loyalty in there. So if there ends up being a mass layoff of federal workers, not even sure that would happen, but if it's not done case by case, my guess is that decision would not be very popular, but hey, maybe I'm wrong. But the part here about issuing new performance plans for senior government officials who are not political appointees and reassign officials to ensure they are optimally aligned to implement his agenda, that one I think should be more popular. Now, there could always be an exception, but I think for the most part, the president is going to want to have people in there who are not actively going to work against him. Now, you might make a case that they're just protecting the institutions, or you might make a case that they're obstructing the president. But next, we've got an order that calls for the elimination of government diversity program, the termination of all federal offices and positions related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as environmental justice. Most of that topic, I think, is going to have solid support. Of course, Democrats, social justice advocates, they're going to be opposed, but if they go to a merit colorblind agenda, those are the values I think that are going to have broad support. Next, we've got withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement. It feels like this is another one that's just going to go back and forth based on who the president is. Trump got out, Biden got back in, and now Trump is out again. I know there's all kinds of debate over this. Reducing emissions is an admirable goal, but I assume the pushback is going to be, why would the U.S. want to hinder itself if every other country is not doing the same? Then we've got ending weaponization of the federal government. It says this one is vaguely written, but it would review potential misconduct within the Justice Department, the SEC, and the FTC. This one I think could be polarizing. Trump is saying he's depoliticizing the Justice Department, and Democrats are saying he's doing the exact opposite. I think that one depends on which side of the aisle you're on. Next, delaying enforcement of a federal ban on TikTok. This this one, I think we've got to see how it plays out. But if TikTok actually was shut down, my guess is there would be a decent amount of backlash to it. I don't think the average voter is really wrapped up in what's going on with TikTok in China. I'm not really even keeping up with it, but they would care if it was shut down. So maybe a deal is worked out and there's an American buyer. We got to see how this one plays out. Next, we've got clemency for January 6 defendants. So we've got a commuting of sentences of 14 individuals charged with crimes related to the riot, and also pardons to all other individuals convicted of related offenses. This one I would guess is going to be mostly unpopular. I do think it would require a case-by-case analysis. Should violent behavior be excused? No, it shouldn't. Could there be sentences for nonviolent behavior that have maybe gone on for too many years? Yeah, that's possible. But I think this kind of pardon, along with what Biden did when he was on his way out of office for Liz Cheney, Anthony Fauci, and members of his family, I think that highlights how there should be some sort of limitations on the pardon process. If you can just pardon an unlimited number of people even before they've been charged or even investigated for any crimes, it seems like an unchecked power that I don't think is going to lead to a great place. Everybody hates it when the president they don't like is doing it, but then when they get in there, they say, hey, now it's my turn. I'm going to do what I want. So I think there could be some kind of reforms with the pardon process. Next, we've got recognizing two sexes. This would recognize male and female, which would be defined based on the reproduction cells at conception. It also directs agencies to issue government documents showing people's sex at conception, stop using gender identity or preferred pronouns, and maintain women-only spaces at prisons and shelters. This one I would guess would be more popular than not, although there could be a couple of more things that could end up being viewed as overreach. I think it comes down to if you can self-identify as male or female and change at will, and it's not an immutable characteristic, then how can there be any distinction between men and women? But there's usually going to be some small exception to every binary or universal standard. But when it comes to gender identity, I think that is something different. I think most people don't care how you present yourself, but they do care what the immutable characteristic is, and that should be static regardless of how you want to live your life. But there's all different arguments on it. I don't think it's going to be solved anytime soon, but we'll see what happens with this executive order. And then we've got expanding American energy production, rolling back Biden environmental and climate regulations. I would think not compelling people as much to transition to electric vehicles, that's going to be mostly a win. Lowering some regulations and doing more drilling, that I would think would mostly be popular as long as it's not going to obviously damage the environment. So then down here we've got a few more. We've got one barring the censorship of American citizens' constitutionally protected speech by the federal government. It mentions under the guise of combating misinformation. That I think should be a win, but of course there's going to be some debate about it. I think if something is way too readily labeled misinformation in an attempt to shut it down, that is a big problem. So who knows what this is actually going to do. We've got a directive aiming at addressing the cost of living crisis. Doesn't say what that is, but those words do sound good. Withdrawing from the World Health Organization. That one I'll leave to the comments. I'd have to read some pros and some cons. How about revoking security clearances held by John Bolton? That one is extremely specifically targeted at John Bolton, known as an establishment never Trump Republican. Down here we've got starting the process to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America and reverting Mount Denali's name to Mount McKinley. The Gulf of America thing I think is hilarious. I don't know if it's actually going to go anywhere. For Denali, I know the two Republican senators in Alaska are opposed to going back to McKinley. So I don't know what's going to happen with that one either, but I know a lot of people say it was McKinley for a long time. Let's keep it at that. And then the counter to that is it was Denali way before it was McKinley. Let's go back to that. And then we've got establishing the Department of Government Efficiency. So there might be some irony there, having a new department about efficiency. That one could be polarizing as well, depending on what they do. We'll have to see what happens. That's a recap here of what we've got for some of Trump's executive orders. I'm sure there's going to be some people that love every single one of these. I'm sure there's going to be a few that hate every single one as well. Most Americans, I think, are going to be closer to the middle. They like a bunch, they've got questions, or maybe they're opposed to at least a couple more. But a lot in the middle, they're just going to want to wait and see on. So what's next for this administration? I'm sure there's going to be more executive orders. I think Trump is going to visit California to the site of the wildfires. But let's get on Polymarket here. We've got the Trump cabinet picks. We've already had Marco Rubio confirmed. And this is the slate we've got lined up for confirmation. Looks like every one of them is extremely likely to be confirmed. Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. are the lowest, but even they still look pretty likely. So we've got day one down of the new administration. The first 100 are going to be crucial. And then after that, we've only got more than 1,300 to go. So we've got to see what happens. There's going to be all kinds of legal challenges, and we've got to see what kind of honeymoon period Trump has. So that's it for this one. Let me know in the comments. What do you think about these executive orders? Are there at least one or two you like? Maybe one or two that you're not a big fan of? Maybe you like all of them. Maybe you don't like any of them. And how about these cabinet picks? Let me know down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.